Welcome, everybody, to our final webinar for the end of the year. Thank you for listening to all the previous sessions. Thank you to my team who has helped me put these together. And as we move into the new year, I think we're all looking forward to the new year as we do every year. And we will have good things. We're planning good materials for the upcoming year. So let's go ahead and get started. Um, as I've mentioned, and I try to make these timeless. We're talking about year-end stuff, but whether that year-end stuff is fiscal year-end or calendar year-end, it doesn't matter. As I sit here today, I happen to be at the end of a calendar year-end, but the comments that the topics that we're addressing today are really timeless and really have nothing to do with December to January. It really has to do with year-end to year-end. It's just a natural thing that we as humans use the year end as a reset. We start to think about the new year and new ways of doing our life, personally, professionally, new things to think about. And so I wanted to just spend time to talk about that. I think it's also important as we plan ahead to keep the pace up. So it's very easy to spend the first month of the year, depending on what your year end looks like and the seasonality of your business. It can be very easy to just slack off in that first month and go, well, it's the first month. The results are what they are. And we can certainly recover later if we're trying to achieve our goals. We don't have to achieve all of our goals in the first year. I've heard it time and time again. And I just say, that the successes that you have in the first month of the year will be in the results for the year end. So the more that you can get done in the first month of the year and not quote slough off, not start slowly, but the more you're able to hit the new year hard, if you're trying to achieve results, those results that get baked in, those results that happen in that first month will be baked in and will make a material difference to your year-end results. Those results will still be in your year-end results and will make a material difference. So I just think it's important to, as we round the corner and start to think about the new year, to do it rightly, to plan properly, and to get started with the right year. So with that, hello, everybody. My name's Karl Baker. I am the managing member of Baker CFO Advisory, and we are an accounting firm providing fractional CFO services, advisory services, outsourced accounting, tax services, outsourced accounting, tax services. And we're really just here to help growing businesses that are trying to achieve more. There comes to a place where those growing businesses will need financial leadership help, and that's what we are here to do. We do it every day. We provide clarity, confidence, and peace of mind as we work with growing entrepreneurial business owners in closely held businesses. So, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, and let's now finally get started. I've talked a little bit about these comments, but and I say here December is a strategic window, and really just referencing the fact that year end, there are many companies that are on a fiscal year end. So keep that in mind, and I am certainly thinking about that as I address these topics. But why does year end reassessment matter? And I gave some of my thoughts about that in the introductory comments. The year end is a turning point. It's a time for us to reset, to think. Many companies actually do a budget, and maybe those budgets are done before year end, but that's another way of resetting and thinking about the business from a financial standpoint. So I think it's just fairly self-evident that year-end reassessment or year-end is a reset point. So let's talk about what we could be doing to improve our businesses as we turn the corner. I tell people, especially those that are new to financial reporting, new to accounting, new to using data to understand the story of their business. I tell people all the time that financial statements tell not just they're not just a bunch of gobbledygook numbers. They actually are telling the story in numbers format as to what's happening with your business, especially when you look at one single period's worth of financial statements and compare to historical trends. And when you do that on a collective basis, looking at trends, looking with a understanding of the institutional knowledge of what actually happened, when you look at uh, what you own and what you owe, what your customer base looks like now, what your cost structure looks like. When you do that with an educated eye, your numbers, your financial statements actually tell a story. And uh, this reset period, this planning period, is a way for you to stop, do your best to look at what that story is telling you from an objective standpoint, and then respond to that, evaluate and respond to that. So that's really why we're here today. So we're going to talk about several things, and I've done a similar session. I was meaning to mention this. I've done a similar session to this earlier in the year because I do think it's important to stop, pause, think about what's going on in your business more than once a year. And so earlier in the year, I did a mid-review session, and that session you might want to look back to it. It was several presentations ago chronologically, and I made reference to things that were a little more quantitative in that session, a few more things, a few more references to actual key performance indicators, numbers on the financial statement, actually more nerdy things in the financial statements. Today we're going to talk a little more qualitative, less about line items on your financial statements, less about actual metrics to be looking at. I did a few of those things in the prior session. Today we're going to keep it a little more qualitative and stare out the window, dream a little bit, think about things that you might need to be thinking about with your business. So as I say that, let's move into this slide. Operational performance versus strategic intent. Are you accomplishing what you're really wanting to accomplish? You go into a year ago, or several years ago, and you had a dream, you had a vision, you had a plan for your business. Are you accomplishing that? Step back and try to evaluate that objectively. Have there been shortfalls in your dreams, in your accomplishments? Why is that? It might be that you're not working hard enough, probably not, and I just throw that out as a universe of options. Are you working at your highest level? You probably are. So what are other things that are happening that are outside of your control? Are you running out of cash? Has your market changed? Has your customer base changed? Have the opportunities within your location, your locale, changed? Are there other things to address? Is your team telling you things either indirectly through hints, through turnover, through their own behaviors, through their own actions, through their resignations, through a lack of applications? Are are your people telling you something about your business, and are you listening to that? So just thinking about that, are there things happening in your business that you need to think about differently? So something I think that's very important. It's very qualitative. It takes discipline. It takes a willingness to listen. It takes a willingness to um, objectively and critically evaluate yourself, your business, how things are going, and more importantly, if you're willing to hear all those things, are you willing to respond to those things? And some of those responses might come from things that you can't control. A bank might be telling you you need to do something different. Well, once that happens, it's a whole different ballgame. But before we get to third parties telling us we need to change, it's good for us to evaluate it on our own. Secondarily, what needs to shift as we turn the corner to the new year? Or not secondarily, but as we segue into the four topics, the four main headers that we're talking about today, um, we I have this slide that addresses those main things. So I think it's important to state that second line item. Reassessment does not necessarily mean starting over. It certainly probably does not mean rewriting your whole plan. Every few years, I think that is important. I've done that in my business. I've helped clients navigate through that process. Clients have navigated that I've worked with have navigated through that process without me, and all a-okay. But I do think it's important to revise and reflect on your plan periodically, and as you do that, you'll see opportunities. But today, what we're going to talk about is a focus on four key areas that you can use to evaluate your evaluate as you're reflecting. Sorry, I got a little bungled there. As you're reflecting on these, on the new year, on the future, and what opportunities you have, I've broken my thoughts into four areas: numbers, cash flow, what your team says, and how to communicate any of your conclusions that you've drawn. All right, so let's move into these. Leading through the numbers, turning insight into action. Um, I say in that first line, the goal of reassessment is not analysis. And of course, when I hear that, I start to think analysis paralysis, and that is something that's very easy that people can get caught up in. I've done it in my own business. I've seen people do it. Sometimes I would say actually doing some analysis is better than no analysis. So it's not all bad, but the whole purpose of this is not just to look at the data and do what with it? Nothing. Pat ourselves on the back that we did all the right analysis. No, the purpose of it is to do this analysis so that we can come up with an action plan. So, using the historical insight and current signals, leaders can make informed decisions, reduce uncertainty, enter the new year position for success. We've talked about all those things, and it, as we say in this slide, it's about preparing for success. And as I have in my notes here regarding this, leading through the numbers, and I've made reference to it earlier. It might feel like I'm referencing a budget, and it might be a budget. A budget is preparing a upcoming new year budget is akin to, or is a component of reflecting on opportunities, planning for the future. It's a component of it, and it certainly can be a byproduct of that. And many people have different thoughts about how to do a budget. Is a budget a status quo? Is a budget a reflection of major changes? And all of those things are possibilities, and it just depends. This isn't a session on budget, but it's true. And as I was preparing for this, it's a truth that budgeting is a component of this, but what I'm really talking about here is bigger than that, and a budget might be a byproduct of that. All right, so cash flow as a strategic lever. What are we saying here? Cash flow is often the earliest indicator of future stress or opportunity. Isn't that the case? And we're not talking about cash balance. We're talking about cash flow. And if you're not paying attention to your cash flow, because you have enough starting money in the bank, you may not realize until it's too late that your cash flow has started to struggle or started to be challenged. If you have a lot of cash in the bank on day one of your period of your year and your cash flow starts to go down, you may not notice if you're not paying attention because you're still able to pay your bills, not from the cash flow, but from your reserves. And you can do that for a while, but managing that cash flow on a regular basis will allow you to preserve your reserves. So just an opening comment, it's important to manage your cash flows and your ongoing cash flows for purposes of managing your total cash position. If you're doing that, one, you're going to protect your cash position, but two, if you're doing that, you're going to help yourself in planning ahead for the future. So, what are some of the questions to ask here? Year-end questions to consider: is cash timing aligned with growth plans? Are Do we have enough reserves in our bank to account for growth? If we're growing, usually it's a case that you're having to invest money before you actually get a return. Your money is going out the door before money is coming in the door, and hopefully you'll get a return on that so that those disbursements are an investment. That's the whole goal of growth plans. You're putting money out into the market in various ways, whether it's marketing, hiring, investing in equipment that you'll be able to resell or use in your business. Putting those monies out, are do you have the capability to do that? Do you have the reserves? Do you have the access to capital? Are you able to borrow it? Do you have funding partners? So other things here. Well, I've already mentioned the second budget: reserves adequate for uncertainty and for growth. Is your funding strategy? Uh, are you funding strategy or just covering operations? That's a very important thing. So again, uh, I've helped clients as they are managing their cash flows. A lot of things can get masked in your day-to-day cash flows. It's a truth that for your stable operations, you'll probably have some stable operations and then you'll have growth operations. Which of those two buckets is your cash flow coming from? You might have stable operations with ongoing collections, ongoing staffing, and ongoing customer service, and then the margins on that will be pretty high. But then you have some investment activity where money is going out the door to a greater extent than money is coming in the door. And I think it's important to understand the difference between those two, and to the extent that you can capture those two distinctions, the more you'll at least be able to draw some conclusions about what's happening with your routine operations versus your operations that have a growth initiative to it. And I've had many instances recently, in fact, where some growth plans were happening, and we really split the cash flows between ongoing stable operations versus growth initiatives. And you can draw some conclusions from that. So I just think that's important. Healthy cash flow creates options. Obviously, if the more money is coming in and the faster it's coming in, then the less you have to tap reserves, the less you have to tap funding sources, and it makes you it puts you in a stronger position, so that if you do have to seek additional financing, seek assistance from funding partners, you'll be able to do that from a position of strength. Moving into a couple other things. As we think about the keys to success for a business, what are those keys to success? Obviously, money is the byproduct of that, but more than likely, your staff, your team is driving success. They're the front lines with customer service. They're the ones that are following your processes and procedures and protocols. They're the ones that are suffering if you are, as a business owner, are a bottleneck. So that team is the holder of a key to success for you. They're a holder for um, the culture. They're a key to understanding what's really happening from a positive or negative standpoint. So understanding that to the extent possible is very important. I did say that your team is driving the culture. I actually don't want to mislead anybody in thinking that they are the key to actually setting the culture. I have come to really appreciate over time how business owners, the leaders, they are setting the culture. The tone at the top is super important and will set the tone for the cultural attitude and way things are happening. So just a little aside there, but as we talk about strategy, as we talk about what's happening in your business historically, and then what we need to do as we reflect on that moving forward from a team perspective, what is it that our team is telling us? Do we have all the right roles that are aligning with our priority? Do we have the right people in place? I continually reflect on the Jim Collins good to great, and do we have the right people in the right seats on the bus? We might have the right people, they may not be in the right seats. We may have the right seats. Do we have the right seats lined out and defined? And then do we have all the people in those right seats? And those actually require some very hard decisions oftentimes. So, do we have the right roles that are aligned with our priorities? Are we just going along with a status quo, or are there changes that need to be made that are in the best interest of your customer base, that are in the best interest of you as a business owner, that are in the best interest of solving problems in the market? And do we have all the right people in place? Are the leaders equipped for the next year's challenges? Are next year's challenges going to be different than this year's challenges? And do they have the right um, do they have the right training? Do they have the right resources? Do they have the right attitude? Have they do they have the right people below them if there are multiple layers in your company? So just think about the resources and the preparation of your team. I mentioned bottlenecks earlier, and I know in many closely held businesses that don't have a lot of layers, bottlenecks come from the ownership group. Let's be real. No offense, no insult meant by that, but it's a truth that especially in an earlier stage of a business, the ownership group is wearing a lot of hats, and that might be in the finance hat, that might be in the sales and marketing hat, that might be in the HR bucket and the hiring, it might be in the customer service. And if the person or persons in the ownership group are wearing all those hats, naturally, maybe not at first, but eventually, naturally, there are going to be some bottlenecks. So where are those bottlenecks forming? Are they forming at the leadership level, at the ownership level? Are they forming at a place downstream, so to speak, in terms of a corporate hierarchy? And what's causing that? Is that because something has changed? Is it something with the staff member, a bad attitude? Or does that person need additional assistance? Has there been something changed in the way you're doing business? Are your customers telling you something different? Understanding that is very key to adjusting and to evaluating those things and then responding, more than just evaluating, but actually responding. Delaying people decisions will create larger problems later. And that's so easy for me to sit here and say that in front of a camera. And if we're all business owners and we're all listening to this, we've probably had those situations. And there's a right and a wrong time to address those things. But it is a truth that the sooner you are honest with yourself about changes that need to be made from a staffing perspective, and then take action on that, the more effective you'll be, the more of a leader you'll be, the more positive the overall results will be for your business. So, just a commentary there. Maybe I sounded like I hopped on a soapbox. I don't know. But I just know it's a truth. I've seen it with clients, I've seen it in my own business, I've seen it in working in the corporate world in past lives. It's just very important. All right. So we've talked about our financial results. We've talked about numbers. We've talked about cash flow. We've thrown in some HR commentary. We could comment on several other things, but I'm ending these talking points with a comment here. Communicating these adjustments with confidence is key. Understanding that you are making the decisions that are in the best interest of you as a business owner, in the best interest for you as a business owner, best interest for the business. And hopefully, if you're honest and you care about your people, you're making decisions that are ultimately in the best interest of your customers and your staff as well. So, communicating those things in a way that is effective is key. So let's talk about what those things mean. And the second line item on my set of bullet points here: reassessment can create uncertainty if not communicated well. So you can make all these assessments and then just start telling people we're making changes and not tell people why, or just make changes and not, people may not even understand where those changes are coming from. That will create uncertainty, will create frustration, will create paranoia. It could impact customer service, and then you have downstream effects for that. So, first thing is just to be good at communicating, and that's certainly a major part of leadership. So, effective leaders will explain the why, not just the what. You don't have to tell every bit of your of all of your proprietary knowledge as an owner, but certainly you owe it to your staff, to your customer base, to explain more than just the what, but the why. And there's a lot that could go into that, but the more explanatory you are, the more bringing people along, that fosters trust. It fosters a better morale. It fosters people wanting to follow you. There's another verb there that I'm thinking about, but it just fosters goodwill among the people that you're working with. So use the data, excuse me, use the data to support your decisions. Certainly, there is a component of intuition, but using the data, if you only rely on intuition and not use the data, or vice versa, if you only rely on data and not apply some sort of institutional knowledge and some gut check to evaluate the reasonableness of the data and the conclusions you're drawing from it, then you might end up in a different direction. But using the data to support decisions, reinforce that direction and expectations with good communication. Uh, and I've addressed several of these other things: building trust. The more trust you have, and the with the people you're working with, the more goodwill there is, the more people can handle the uncertainty, the more they can handle the change. And inevitably, there are going to be some problems, some challenges, and you might have to dip into that capital to affect change and to continue advancing the cause. And most people can handle problems and challenges if there is a trust there and if there is good communication. And all of those problems can be overcome with good communication and past history where trust has built up. So, I've talked about this several times now. I hope all of this resonates with you as a business owner. Now is a good time to reassess plans. Now is the time to evaluate this year's performance and anticipate what that might carry over into in the next year. Uh, Reviewing what the numbers are telling you, identifying where adjustments are needed, taking action where there is still time, and we should all be honest with each other. We're doing this, more than likely, we're doing this in some sort of overt or indirect way anyway. As we move into, if you're a calendar year, as we move into January, you're thinking about this anyway. Put a process and a system in place. Put some thoughts in place. Set some time aside and actually retreat into this for a while. Don't do it so much that you get into decision paralysis. And maybe you might decide that year end isn't the right time to do this. You might decide there's a better time of year to do this, but take these principles and reflect on and put a system in place to actually intentionally and overtly do this. And I think you will see results. I've seen it in businesses, I've seen it in my own life, I've seen it in the corporate world. And eventually, it's a truth that if you don't do this, a third party will tell you to do it, and you're not going to like the way they tell you to do it. It might end up, if you don't do this, eventually through attrition, your business ends up segueing into the later stages of a life cycle. So really, what we're doing here is we're doing our best to extend the life cycle so that we get uh, so that we avoid the mature end, the bankruptcy end, the closure end. Really, all of this has to be done in order to keep the boat rowing down the stream, so to speak. When we get to those end life cycles, other people, funding sources, banks, they start telling you how to do this and you start to lose control. And that's just a truth. I've seen it many times. So the more we are intentional about this, the more we are overt about this, the more we are honest with ourselves about this, um, the more effective you'll be, and the results will be there. I promise you that. Thank you for listening today. We do have a white paper that might give you a few nuggets. Look for that. We'll do our best to have that in the notes here when this goes live. And we have lots of other white papers on our website. And as we segue into the page that shows our phone number, my email address, you can also find us on just our website, which is Baker CFO Advisory.com. You can find lots of resources, blogs, white papers, case studies, information about our services. And you'll see, if you've been following along, we've historically announced in this session what we are doing, what we are going to speak about next session. Well, I am undertaking some version of what I'm talking about today in my own business. We're reflecting on how we do this. We're reflecting on our topics. And we've had some changes in our business, which has caused us to be a little behind. That's okay. We'll respond and navigate through that. But we're actually spending some time reflecting on our topics and how we do this. So I don't have that planned yet, just to be honest with you. We'll announce it, and we'll do our best to be ready on the 4th. We usually do this on the 3rd Thursday of the month. I'm planning to do this on the 4th Thursday of the month in January. And again, this is timeless. These notions will apply long beyond 2025 and 26. But I'll just end with thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.